I'd like to welcome everybody this evening. Tonight we're going to discuss chord inversions. I know it's everybody's favorite topic. I get asked a lot about it with students going, how do you get from one chord to the other so smoothly when they're just, banging around doing everything root position? Well, I'm going to show you how to navigate through some inversions. So let's start by saying what an inversion actually is. Okay, so an inversion, if I play a C chord and I'm playing C, E, and G, that's considered root position. That's a root position C chord. Now, we have two inversions of this chord. Using the same three notes, C, E, and G, we can also take that C and move it up top and get E, G, and C. That's called first inversion. If we take the E and move that up top, that's called second inversion. So we have root, first, second, root, second, first, root. Okay? Pretty easy. Let's do that with the G chord. Here's your G chord. I'll put a bass note in there too. Alright, so we have G, B, and D. I'm going to take the G and move it up top. That puts me in first inversion. If I put the B up top, that gives me second inversion. So it doesn't matter if the root has changed. I can still I'm still playing chord inversions. Now I can, by changing the bass note, yes, but what we're concerned about is changing the actual positioning of the chord. So if you were to have to go from G to D to E to C, we're sticking with our good old 1-5-6-4 progression. Now that's a lot of moving around. What we're doing now is I'm making all my movements very close. And if we look on the screen at that, there's my G, there's my D, there's my E minor, there's my C. So what I'm doing is root position, first inversion, second inversion. Okay, so how do I know what these inversions are, you may be asking? I'm going to give you a little exercise that's going to help you start mastering your inversions and how to play them. So, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the good old circle of fifths. And you can see that we start up here with C, and we go to G, to D, to A, to E, B. And why are these fifths? Well, here's C. If I count up 5, I come to G. If I count up 5 more, D, A, E, B, F sharp, so on and so forth. So it goes on and on just like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little exercise that is going to take us through the entire circle of fifths. You'll find it a little challenging at first, but I think once you get the hang of it, it'll be relatively easy. So, without further ado, here's how we're going to do this. Going through the circle of fifths, we're going to deal with 3 chords at a time. And we're only doing this for major chords, but this will also apply for the minors, and I'll show you that as we go on as well. So, if we break the circle of fifths up into 3 chords, C, G, and D, then A, E, and B, F sharp, D flat, A flat, E flat, B flat, F, C. I'm going to play all these chords. I'm going to start with my C on middle C, and I'm going to wind up on my C right below middle C. So just so you can see that happening, there's my C. I'm going to end up here. Now, I'm not going to go C, G, D, A, E, B, F, and so on. I'm going to do all this in one swift movement. There you go. There's all 12 major chords, and I barely had to move. The thing about when you use inversions in your chords, it can give your chords somewhat of a melodic structure as well, which creates a nice movement in any composition you're writing. What we're going to do, we're going to play a root position C. Then our next chord in the circle of fifths is G. Well, we already have the G up top, so all we need is the B and the D. See, that's a very simple movement there. And I'm going to switch back and forth here to G. You see how big of a leap that is? I've got that G in common, so I'm going to keep it. Now my next chord that I'm going to go to in the circle of fifths is D. Well, I have a D right here. So it's a second inversion. That means I need A, D, F sharp. Look how easy that is. Instead of going and there are a lot of songs that move through this circle of fifths. If you think of Paul McCartney's Maybe I'm Amazed, I'm not going to sing it, but so there you have a C to G to D to A. Uses the first 4 chords in the circle of fifths. Hey Joe by Jimi Hendrix. The Time Warp from Rocky Horror. So as you can see, a lot of things are written in the circle of fifths, and getting to them smoothly. Can you imagine if that's just a lot of that's too much moving around. It doesn't sound smooth at all. So I say take 3 chords at a time, because the pattern always repeats. It starts out root position, first inversion, second inversion. Then the next 3, root position, first inversion, second, root, first, second, root, first, second, back to root. Now, what you want to be able to do is to do this forwards and backwards. So as you're doing C to G to D, make sure you can do that backwards as well. C, G, D, D, G, C. When you have that down, move to A. Then you do the A, E, B, B, E, A. Then you put all 6 of those chords together. Backwards and forwards. So this is a great way to practice this, and then you can apply it when you're doing songs, when you're writing pieces of music, be it pop songs or more involved songs. Inversions are always used. There's never a time where we're not using an inversion. Well, I won't say there's never a time when we're not, but for the most part, we use inversions. By using those inversions, and by the way, you should be able to do this with either hand and backwards. You may find this a little trickier if you're not left-handed or ambi, which I tend to be, but you still have to work at it, and it doesn't take that excuse me, it doesn't take that much. Once you get used to it, it's actually quite simple. Just like just about anything, once you've done it enough, it becomes very simple. If you don't have your circle of fifths memorized, which a lot of people don't, there's a way you can do this without referencing it. When we play our C chord, the top note, G, is your next chord. While you're playing the G chord, your middle note, D, is the next note you're going to. And when you're playing D in second inversion, your bottom note, A, is the next chord you're going to. Then we repeat that. The top note, E, the middle note, B, the bottom note, G flat or F sharp, and so on and so forth. So if you don't have the circle of fifths memorized, then you can fall back on that little trick. Because in each inversion, you're going to come across the note that there's always going to be at least one common tone between all these major chords. So with the C, going to G, the G is common. Going to D, the D is common. Going to A, the A is common. Going to E, the E is common. So you're really only moving 2 notes at a time. So that should make it a little easier. Some of you may need to go to your G in first inversion. You might want to play the C chord with your right hand, and if you don't know the notes in every chord, you can play the next chord, which is G, in your right, and see what notes you need. So if I'm playing G, B, and D here, well, I see I already have a G, so now I just need the B and D. And then going to the D chord, I've got the D already. I need F sharp and A, so I'll just move that down and that down. And now I have my D chord. So it's not really cheating, it's just a little way of helping yourself if you don't know how to spell chords yet. But you should know that spelling a chord is nothing more than every other note in the musical alphabet. C, E, and G. A G chord has the notes G, B, and D. Doesn't matter which order, those are going to be the three notes. The D chord has D, F sharp, and A. So bear that in mind when you're spelling chords. Now, if you don't know your key signatures, well, then here's where Mr. Circle of Fist comes in, because I said F sharp when we got to D because the key of D has an F and a C sharp in it. We don't need the C sharp to play a D chord, but we do need that F sharp. And that's that note right up here on this top line. Now, if you don't read music, that could be another lesson, but just a very quick overview of reading notes. The spaces, that space, the next space, well, it might be easier to see it here. This space is an F. The next space is an A. Next space is a C. Next space is an E. Spells the word face, F-A-C-E. The lines, E, G, B, D, F. And the little mnemonic that I use is every good burger deserves fries. A little bit of reading can help you on this, so that when you see the key of A, you see that top line, this line right there where my arrow is pointing is an F. You see that third space is a C. Yeah, hey G, that's my cat. She likes to come in, check out what's going on. Generally disrupts things for a couple of minutes, but she's fine. So, and then the G is also, well, that G is also sharp. So that was for the key of A. So you can see where, and this little hashtag is a sharp sign. I actually had a student ask me how many hashtags were in the key of E. And of course my answer was none, because they are not hashtags. They're sharp symbols. And the flat symbols look like a little B, and they sit on the lines as well, and they tell you exactly what note is going to be flat every time you get to it, unless otherwise notified. So if you know a little bit about that, that'll help you manipulate through these and spell the chords better. So like when you spell, we go from C, G, D, A, E. When we get to the B, we know that it's, if we count every other letter of the musical alphabet, B, it would be B, D, and F, but because in the key of B, there's a bunch of sharps, you have 5 sharps, F and D are both sharp. So that B, D, and F becomes B, D sharp, F sharp. I hope this is making sense to everyone or anyone, assuming anyone is here. So let's, if you have your piano handy, let's try this. And I suggest putting the root note in your left hand so that you can really hear the chord very fully. So if we start with C, we're going to just move very slowly to the G. Then we're going to move to D. Then A. Then E. Then B. F G sharp. I like to call this A flat at this point. Then we go to E flat, B flat, F, and C. Then we move backwards through the circle of fifths. So we're going to start on the C, but we're going to go to the left this time. F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B, E, A, D, G, C. So this is a good exercise. This is an inversion exercise, and I suggest you start it on C. You start it in root position starting on a D, and go D, A, E, B, and just follow it, and start it on an E in root position, and go through that way as well. This way you cover all the inversions of all the major triads. So starting on C root position, D root position, and E root position. You could do this with C, C sharp, D. I just find it easier to do C, D, and E. It just makes things a little less. I'm not sure what the word is. It just makes it a little easier. So we do the exact same thing with the minor chords. You'll have C minor, G minor, D minor, A minor, E minor, B minor, F sharp minor, C sharp minor, A flat minor, E flat minor, B flat minor, F minor, and back to the C minor. You do the same thing. You start on D, go to D to A to E to B, and then you start on E. So you go E minor, B minor, F sharp minor, C sharp minor. Again, following. And that same rule applies though. Whatever your top note is your next chord. So in C minor, C, E flat, G, the G minor is your next chord. B flat, D, and G. That means the D, the middle note, is your next chord. A, D, and F. That means your bottom note is the A is your next chord, and then it starts all over again. The E is your next chord, the B is your next chord, the F sharp is your next chord. Let's take the 1, 5, 6, 4, but let's use inversions. So let's start in a root position G, go to a second inversion or a first inversion D, a first inversion E minor, and a second inversion C. Now if you look up here at how the movement is, watch how smooth this is. As opposed to a lot less movement. Now, and I can do this progression starting, instead of G in root position, let's start in G first inversion. So now, see, that sounds great, because now I've only got if you look at voices in soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, we're going to just say the bass is the actual root of the chords. My soprano note, I'm on the G to F sharp, back to the G, and then I keep the G instead of going lot of movement. Anybody got time for all that? As you get more familiar with inversions, you'll be able to put these together in all kinds of progressions. Let's keep this. Let's think of some other progressions. We'll start with a simple 1-4-5. 1, 4, 5, 1. Well, we could. See, I have hardly any movement going on. There's a root position C, second inversion F, first inversion G, back to the root. I can start that in first inversion. I can start it in second inversion. Where you start and where you which inversion you start with is entirely up to you. If you're learning a song note for note off of listening to a record or something like that, then I would typically try and pick up those voicings. But you're going to find 99 out of 100 times that pianist is using inversions to get somewhere. So we could have a G to a D to an E minor to a G, C, G, A minor, G. So by using inversions, I can also create more interesting bass lines. So if I go G, G to D to E minor to G, 7, C, G, A minor, G. By using inversions, I can make that bass line for a much more pleasing chord progression as well. All I'm doing is putting the inversion in the bass. So for the G chord, I'm root position. For the D, I'm using the third. E is root. For the next G, I'm using the fifth. For the C is root. For the G is the third. Then the 2 chord, then the 1 chord. So it just makes it much more pleasing than skipping around. It's so much moving around, I can't even think that way. Now here's a little trick for some inversions. If you're on a 1 chord and you want to get to a 3 chord, all right, a 1 chord in the key of C is C. C, E, and G. A 3 chord is E minor. E, G, and B. So you're only 1 note away. So when you play that C, E, and G, to get to that 3 chord, just bring your C down to a B. See how easy that is? Changing one note changes that whole chord. Now let's go and raise this G to an A. That gives you a 6th chord, because the 1 chord, the 3 chord, and the 6th chord share common notes. So it's very limited movement at that point. So you want to be able to, if you can understand things like that, that by just moving that one note, I barely had to move anywhere. So this is good practice for you. Just take any chord progression, any song that you're familiar with, that you know the chords to, and try and manipulate it in different ways. You can start in root position. You can start in first or second inversion. If we did that same 1 3 6 2 5 1. So if I play that C in first inversion, all I have to do to get to the 3 is change this note to there. See how simple that is? And I can even So again, very limited movement, but much more melodic movement. There we go to a 4 chord, to the 5. 1 3 4 5. That would be like Marvin Gaye's "Let's Get It On." Now this is the other thing that I do a lot. I will change an inversion on a pattern. So like taking that 1 3 4 5, see, I took that E minor and I moved it from second inversion up to root position, maybe to set up for the 4 chord, instead of just going. You can do all these things within your playing, but you're at that point you're still keeping a consistent and a very melodic movement happening. Now the other thing that I'm not going to delve into too deeply here, but one of the reasons why triads, major and minor chords, are so important. If I play a C major and I put a C in the bass, alright, so we have a C chord there. But if I change my bass to an A, same C chord, but with an A in the bass, now I have an A minor 7. If I put an F in the bass, I get an F major 7 sus 2. I like to just call it an F9 no third. That would be with the, and then if I put the D in the bass, I get a slash chord, C over D, or a D9 sus 4. So just off of that one chord, I'm getting 4 different chords being able to do that. Same thing when I go to the G. And you hear that sus chord a lot. I think last week I used easy as an example. your sus. So when you're doing this exercise, I suggest using a metronome. And if your tempo is there, 2, 3, 4, then your next chord, next chord, until you get to the point where you can do it every 2 clicks. Then on every click. And so on and so forth. So this is one of the reasons why I say practice it in groups of 3. Know those first 3 frontwards and backwards before moving on. So know C, G, and D before you move to E or A, E, B. If you do that and just take everything incremental, you'll get it under your fingers a lot easier, because that's really all you're trying to do, is get things under your fingers a little more. And doing things that you normally, that you probably normally do, but just in a different way. So you don't have to do all that jumping around, because when it comes time to really, start playing multiple chords and, moving from to, just is very within a short span of the keyboard. I don't have to go through all that. And especially if you're accompanying someone, you want to give them as sparse of a background, fill in the holes, but just not doing a lot, just playing a chord, a couple of notes in between whatever they may be doing, and doing things that way. So I hope this helps some of you and that you'll apply it. Anyway, hope everybody has a good evening. I hope it's pleasant where you are, and until next time, I'll see you then.